there's an old Mark Twain quote that says, "Don't let your studies get in the way of your education."
Yes.
And I think university is a chance for that. Like there's a lot to learn, and I'm always slightly disappointed, especially in our communities. You see a very formulaic go to university, study BCom or study to become a CA or chartered accountant. You spend 4 years just about with the same friends as you did in high school. You attend lectures almost like you did school classes, and then you're done with university. When actually it's an opportunity for a lot more learning. And yeah, I think in many cases it's a wasted opportunity.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our third episode of Moonshore Journeys with our dear brother Haroon Meer, co founder and CEO of Thinkst Canary, and joining us all the way from South Africa. Super excited to hear his journey. Thinkst Canary is a cybersecurity startup, and we'll hear all about the journey, how did we get here, the lessons learned, the milestones, and what you can take away from this. So, with this, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, Haroon.
Wa alaikum salam. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Great. So, though typically we like to start take you back to the future or back to the past, and perhaps get us started about some of your time from the early childhood or high school. What did you think then? What were you thinking about yourself then?
childhood childhood and high school is pretty far to go back. I think at that time mostly I just wanted to play football.
Agree.
So I went to university. Like I think we can start with university. And while I was at university, almost to show my age, the internet was just kicking off. So you are starting to get web browsers and stuff. And on the one hand, I had the degree that I was signed up for, computer science, but the university had a computer services division. And so I started working at the computer services division for the university. I largely ignored my studies and got kicked out in first year. So there's hope for people who don't attend their studies. Also, yeah, it wasn't all good. I played a lot of pool, but I started working at the university. And so I joined the university full time, which meant that my degree would be free. And I actually worked at the university for 10 years. And it was super great. In part, lots of my peers at the time overseas were breaking into networks so that they could learn different systems, like learn Unix systems or learn machines like that. And by working at the university, I got access to all those systems without doing anything illegal. And so I ended up working on the early Solaris boxes, the early Spark boxes. Literally for that 10 years, I just lived on campus, just doing stuff on their networks. It was super great. I ended up owning all of the internet infrastructure at the time, and it meant I could study random stuff. So I ended up with my degree doing law, ended up doing marketing, I ended up doing English. So it was just fun. And you're young and you're learning, and all of that was great. And then just after 10 years were up, I left to join a young company that was starting in Pretoria that was going to do network security penetration testing, which at the
So I'm going
time
to quickly
was
pause here for a sec
sure.
here. So I think
Sure.
especially when it comes to university, right? A lot of the people just think that, hey, I'm in university, I made it. Now the university will take care of me, right? What do you have to say there? It looks like you had a busy time. You were not just, okay, I just need to complete my courses, get a XYZ GPA, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, I think universities are a completely underutilized section of our communities. I think you won't easily get a time of your life again when you're exposed to so many people who are just there to learn. The opportunities to learn are so great, and especially nowadays with the internet. Like one of the things I'm slightly annoying about and argue with my kid cousins about is I feel like if I were in university again, I'd be ridiculously awesome. Like you can be studying in tiny university down in Durban, South Africa, but you can take Andrew Ng's course on machine learning at the same time that you're doing yours. Like you can literally learn from the best people in the world, and you can take that back to your classes. Like the opportunity to push the envelope is so great in university. You almost will never get that chance again. Like the world kind of says, hey, here's your time, go just learn stuff. And I think in some ways university is wasted on the young. I think when you just finish high school, you're almost a little too young to appreciate what a great opportunity that is.
Right.
And you'll sometimes see more mature students like spend some time, come back, and then they really appreciate that opportunity. So yeah, and again, it's not to say kids shouldn't enjoy themselves. It's also the time when they just meeting friends, they're getting some freedom. But it's a great opportunity to learn stuff. I think there's an old Mark Twain quote that says, "Don't let your studies get in the way of your education."
Yeah.
And I think university is a chance for that. Like there's a lot to learn, and I'm always slightly disappointed, especially in our communities. You see a very formulaic: go to university, study BCom or study to become a CA or chartered accountant. You spend 4 years just about with the same friends as you did in high school. You attend lectures almost like you did school classes, and then you're done with university. When actually it's an opportunity for a lot more learning. And yeah, I think in many cases it's a wasted opportunity.
Great, brilliant. Thank you so much for that. All right, so let's take you out of the university now. So you were,
So I leave the university, and I joined this company that's doing at the time penetration testing. And so at the university I started off when I was working there just doing random computer stuff. So networking, like at the time the MCSC, the Microsoft stuff was all the rage, and then I did a little bit of programming, and like I say, I ended up owning all of their internet systems, which was just fortunate because when I got there, nobody else owned those systems.
mhm.
And so I could play with it and figure it out. And like it sounds like an old man thing to say, but like one of the consistent themes that's worked really well for me is just to do the work. And mostly I'm lucky because I enjoy some of the drudgery. Like there's a Unix system and DNS has stopped working. Like I don't think it's work to spend all night trying to figure out why it doesn't work. And so like that, I just ended up owning more and more of the internet systems because nobody else wanted to do it. But for me, it wasn't work. It was an absolute blast that people gave me a chance to touch the DNS system for campus or the cache system for campus. And so at the university, there were these old networking people who were very protective of their zones, but they also pretty much didn't want to do more work. And
Yeah.
and so anytime there was spare work to be done, I'd take it because I'll do that. Like that's cool. And so in the end, I ended up owning lots of those systems. And one of the things that started to get attractive was information security, just because breaking into stuff is cool. I think all of us, or lots of us at the time, have healthy amounts of criminal energy, and you were starting to see this job emerge on the internet of people who got paid to break into things. Like there was a company in the U.S. called At Stake, which was one of the first that did this, and again, it's just super cool. Like the thought that people would pay you to break into stuff seemed cool.
Yeah.
Um, in my head, you'd have to know everything about all these systems so that you could abuse it. Like it perfectly fit what I wanted to do. And it turned out there was this tiny company that had just started in Pretoria, which was a distance from my home, but doing this sort of thing. And I got a little bit lucky because I was on a chat room and there was a new exploit that had just come out, and the person who started that company, who started SensePost, had written an exploit for that vulnerability, and I had also written one. And so he came on and he was speaking about his exploit, and I told him, look, why don't you try this? And so we discussed it for a little bit, and then he said, "Hey, listen, would I come up because they're starting this thing as a company?" And so I went up and spoke to them. At the time, they didn't have offices; they were literally operating from his spare bedroom. But it seemed cool to me, and again, one of the advantages I had is like I didn't have commitments, I wasn't married, and like at that point, I felt like I'd learned a lot at the university, but I'd kind of learned as much as I could.
Mm-hmm.
So like early days, I didn't know any of those systems. I didn't know Unix, and at this point, like I pretty much had it under control. Like we were doing cool stuff there. And so I went to do this new thing where I wouldn't know stuff at the get go. And then I spent about 10 years at SensePost, and again, in part due to how things worked out. Like I was lucky, Alhamdulillah, it was good timing. That market grew, and we as a company grew. And one of the things that worked out really well for us is in my first year there, we gave some local talks on stuff that we thought was cool, and then we submitted some talks to international conferences. And one was accepted by Black Hat, which is, well, like you'll know, but the listeners might not know, is like at the time it was a really big deal for us. Like it was the biggest security conference there was. And so we went and we gave a talk on this new type of Trojan that we wrote. This is back in 2002, and we thought we were very clever for doing it. Like we thought we were very cool. But the really nice thing is, very early in our career, in my career, you end up getting exposed to the best in the world at that conference. and and what was cool about it was it changed us, because even when we came back to South Africa, we no longer ranked ourselves amongst South Africans. We ranked ourselves amongst those people, and we kept competing with those people, wanting to do better, wanting to talk. And Alhamdulillah, it worked. Like for the next 10 years, we spoke at every Black Hat, every DEF CON there was. And again, it was a lot of work, but none of it felt like work.
Mm.
Because at the time, you really just wanted to do more. You wanted to be impressive. And so we gave lots of talks and published lots of research, different ways to break into stuff, different, like we published books on it. And then publishing, the way it works with security consulting is you publish stuff and you do talks, and that ends up being your advertising, so you get more work. So it's in the company's best interest for some people to do that sort of stuff. And essentially that's what we did for the next 10 years.
So I'm
You
just gonna take a
mentioned,
quick pause here.
yes,
So one thing
sure.
that I really want to highlight from this is to get out of your comfort zone, right? Because if you're just gonna be in your own bubble, yeah, I'm like super smart compared to the 10 other friends I went to high school with, right? You need to see where your next experts
It's
are, right? Whether it be international conferences or next city or at a country
it's
level, what have you, to find that.
abs- absolutely, it's one of the things that I absolutely think we should do more with the internet. Again, I think the internet, so normally there's this saying that says you are the average of the five people you
Mm-hmm.
interact with most. And even if you take it Islamically, if you take it from hadith, like if you hang around with someone in a perfume shop, like you'll smell good. And one of the things that people don't use the internet enough for is surrounding themselves by the people they want to learn from or emulate, at least in their chosen careers. And it's a horrible mistake, because again, talent is widely distributed around the world, and the internet gives us this opportunity to change who we measure ourselves against. And for us, it was a little bit eye-opening when we went to that first Black Hat. Like I'll tell you a side story that's funny. We arrived like real kids. Like it was myself and Roloff, and we arrived at our first Black Hat. And on that trip, like the airline lost our luggage. Like all we had was our laptops. And so when we landed, we go in. We were just going to Black Hat to speak, but the day we arrived, we saw that there were training classes being given. And at the time, there were these series of books called Hacking Exposed, and the authors of the books were giving this training class. And so when we walked in on day one, like, we didn't know anything, so we actually walked into their training. And it turns out that the guys who wrote that book had included some of our tools in that book. And so they recognized us and they greeted us. But two things were super interesting. One was, we looked at the training and went, "Hey, we can give this training. Like, why are these dudes giving this training?" And so we spoke to Black Hat about it, and of course they were thrilled that now you'd have these esoteric South Africans with funny accents. Like, let's try that. Until today, SensePost still gives hundreds of courses around the world. Like, literally, they've made millions and millions of dollars off what started there with that training. And to go back to your point of doing the work, there was no reason for us to write those tools originally other than pushing ourselves.
Yeah.
But writing those tools then got the hacking exposed people to recognize us, which then got them talking to us. And all of that stuff ends up building on each other. Like, when Black Hat decided, like, should we do training? It's like, yeah, we speakers, we've published these tools, and all of that ends up working out.
Beautiful. And
It,
so
it,
just to
it,
highlight here,
it
right, I think the
Sure.
point about this whole notion of content consumption, right? So we kind of getting out of that mentality. So yes, you're consuming content, but it's related to your field, and then thinking about, well, how can I start contributing at whatever level, and that's how you kind of build up from there.
Yeah, so one of my the soapboxes that I often get onto is this concept of creating instead of just consuming. And I'm genuinely deeply worried that this becomes the big differentiator between most of our people and the people who pull ahead. And whether that's taken from us as South Africans, because I think we have that problem as an emerging economy, but even for us as Muslims, I genuinely feel that there's a mindset that makes us consumers more than producers. And what's really dangerous about it is that, one, you almost don't notice that you're doing it. Like, you can watch an afternoon of TED Talks and think that you've actually been productive. But at a point it becomes potato chips for your mind, right? Like, you just sat there and you watch stuff and you doom scrolled almost. And and creating stuff rewires your brain. You see the world differently when you create stuff. um uh, uh, there's a famous Steve Jobs quote where he talks about how at some point in your life you figure out, if you're lucky, that everything that you see has been built by people just like you. And when you figure out that you can reshape stuff and mold stuff, that your life will never be the same again. And one of the things I am very worried about is that, yeah, as South Africans, as Muslims, we get very used to consumption. And yeah, I think there's huge value in creating stuff. um yeah, so with SensePost, we ended up doing a lot of research, a lot of publications. I think, because you mentioned it in the pre-show, something that's worth discussing there is the question of work-life balance, and how to. So I can't talk globally, and of all the topics I can ever talk about, it's one of the topics I'm most afraid to talk about, because my honest answer is I've largely been unbalanced for lots of my life to achieve this. And I'll give it some caveats because, for example, like, it was my second year at SensePost. At exactly the same time I joined SensePost, I got married. And my wife and I had planned to go for Hajj as soon as we could. So I went for Hajj, and one of the things when I started at SensePost was the realization that says, hey, listen, like, you actually on stage at conferences, and there's not that many Muslims who are. And interestingly, at the time, it was one of the things that I factored in when I said, okay, I should actually grow my beard. I should be unapologetically Muslim. And part of the thought was just to say that people should get used to Muslims standing up and doing good work where being Muslim is not a factor at all. Like people after that should go like, yes, this person does first class work. Oh, he's Muslim. I didn't know. And I think that stuff is important. So we've tried to keep that firmly in mind, and hasn't been something we've compromised on. But certainly to achieve first class work in a field requires dedication that is inherently unbalanced. I've heard of people who say that you can have a balanced family life and do great first class work. I've never seen it, and personally, I I don't know how to do that.
Would you say that it also is a relative thing, right? What may be considered balanced, like with your family support, may not be the norm for another, right? So I think that's just
e-
being on the same
e-
page. That, okay, this is enough for me, sort of
e-
thing.
exactly right. And look, I think everyone's got to make their choices, and but certainly I think some people have tough choices that preclude certain options. Like if you've got to start earning sooner, you've got to do certain jobs sooner. Um, but certainly for my journey, for wanting to do talks at a black hat level, it required me to not do other things. And one of those things I've been super fortunate with is, alhamdulillah, my wife's always been very understanding of that stuff. And so from the very start, she knew that stuff was important to me, because like you will know, it takes many nights where you're working on stuff, and you lose the ability to do family occasions or that sort of thing. And in the fullness of time, alhamdulillah, it's worked out well for us, like monetarily, but there was a chance it could not have, and then you would have spent all that time and not have that to show for it. There's a really nice talk, paper by Richard Hamming called "You and Your Research," that I plug almost any time I talk about such things. But in that talk, Hamming gives recipes for what he calls first class work, and at the time he was talking about like Nobel laureate work or Fields Medal type work. And in the Q&A for that talk, someone asks him this question again about work life balance, because he talks about how doing this sort of work requires you to be unbalanced. And in the Q&A, someone asks him about it, and he expounds where he says, look, you can have a good job and have a good life, but if you want to do the sort of work that qualifies for Nobel, or that is on that end of the spectrum, of course it's going to require sacrifices in other areas. And again, I think as long as you make those choices knowingly, and the people who you are with sign up for those choices, I think it's okay. But yeah, those 10 years, I did a lot of that, and my wife tolerated a lot of me traveling to do these conferences and a lot of me working, because I worked a lot for those 10 years. Um, then we sold that company, allowing me, we didn't sell it for crazy internet style buy an island money, but it gave me enough money to not have to work for a little bit while I focused on other stuff. And one of the things I wanted to do, instead of just breaking into things, I wanted to see if we could start building products and selling them. Again, the thought of building stuff is it's particularly important to me, and I wanted to see if we could build a company like that. Also, financially, Sense Post became a really good company, um, but essentially it's a services business, which means you're selling based on how many people you have, and that always is capped. But if you can build a product company, then potentially you can make money while you're sleeping. And or
Oh,
that
that's
was
interesting.
the thought.
So even when you joined SensePulse, you were not just a consultant; you actually had equity in the business as a co-founder, was it?
Yeah. So when I joined, there were just five people, the five founders, and it was so early. I joined them in their first year that almost everyone thinks I was a founder of SensePost, but actually I wasn't.
We'll take
And
that part out of the podcast.
yeah, I don't mind. And so yeah, today they're part of Orange Cyber Defense, and they're hundreds of people. But yeah, essentially, I was a director of the company, and then I had shares in the company. Interestingly, though, like I think it's worth mentioning because it's one of the things that I often tell kids is I often see kids worry a lot about equity or worry a lot about making money. When I worked at the university, there was a sudden boom for MCSEs or CNEs, Novell engineers at the time, and these people were making lots of money out in industry. And while working at the university, I also got those certifications. Like I I think at the time I was the youngest MCSC in South Africa, and I got my CNE. And I'd keep getting job offers for companies doing that work. But at the time, I felt I could learn more at the university.
Mhm.
And one of the things that's always served me well, and again, it's like I was very fortunate at the time because I didn't have other commitments, but I always optimized for where I'd learn more. Even when I took the job at SensePost, like it was five people in Rulof's bedroom. Like at the time, I had interviewed previously with Deloitte, and Deloitte were a fancy company where you'd wear a tie, and Deloitte weren't going out of business anytime soon. But I thought at SensePost I'd learn more, and optimizing for where you can learn more has always worked well for me. It means you've got to work like hell to earn it,
So you're
but
not thinking
but that's
financially because definitely Deloitte had a better package than SensePost.
exactly right. In fact, going to Sense Post, I earned slightly less than I was at the university,
Oh, even at
and
university.
at
Wow.
the
Okay.
yeah, and at the time, like I was in a pretty great position at the university. Like I was doing cool stuff. The stuff we did with some of those systems weren't done anywhere else. So I was already pretty well known in that space, and I could have gotten a better salary, but I thought Sense Post would be cool and I'd learn more. And so at the time, we chose that, and that has helped me pretty consistently. In fact, a bunch of times we did some stuff where financially it wasn't super prudent or smart. Like even joining SensePost, my initial share discussion was terrible. Like in retrospect, for the amount of work that I did for all of that stuff, but I pretty strongly believe that in the fullness of time that stuff balances out.
Mhm.
And if you optimize for learning, and you manage to push that envelope, mostly that stuff seems to work out. Certainly for me, at this point, alhamdulillah, that stuff's worked out reasonably well. And so it worked at the university. We did SensePost, and SensePost worked out. And then when we sold SensePost, I said I wanted to build a company that builds stuff. And then I had a super strange interlude because I just started Thinkst. And many years ago at SensePost, we gave training, those training courses. And one of the people who was on that training course subsequently went to work at Al Jazeera. And at Al Jazeera, it turned out at that point, they were trying to build their own WikiLeaks system. Like WikiLeaks had been all the rage, and they were building their WikiLeaks. And so that person pinged me to say, "Hey, listen, we're building our own WikiLeaks. We're about to release it. Can you check it out security wise?" And so I looked at it and I told them, "Look, this thing's terrible. Like they basically just had a form upload, and I was like, listen, this thing's not safe. Like, if you get real serious national security people leaking on the system, you're going to endanger their lives. Like, that's not going to work out. And so that person said, hey, listen, would you come here to Doha and check out the system for us? And I just started things, like we weren't doing much. So I said, okay. I flew there, and the week that I flew there was literally the week of Tahrir,
Mm.
when Tahrir happened. And it was electrifying. Like if you were in the Jazeera newsroom when all of that was going on, like it was amazing, right? It was the start of the Arab Spring. And I spoke at the time to their very charismatic director general, who then said to me, hey, listen, like, you've worked for all these other people, you've worked for all these militaries all around the world. Like he's a really charismatic, funny guy. And he said in joke, he said, like, look, you've helped Shaitan for long enough. Like, why don't you come help the good guys for a change? And in part, like, I really wanted to help. Like the world was changing, the Arab Spring was happening, and Jazeera was at the center of it. And I was like, I'd love to help them out. And so I came back home, and I wrote them a proposal saying, listen, here's these products that I want my company to build. um, you guys need these products. So at the time, it was pretty vague. It was like, can we build stuff so your execs know when they've been compromised? Or
Mm.
can we build stuff so that a bunch of stuff like that? And so I said to them, listen, I'll come build it for you guys. And you guys can be my first customer, but I want to sell this to the rest of the world.
And back then
And
there was no EDR, right? You basically just, I think, was pretty much
e-
regular
ex-
antivirus. That's about it.
exactly right. And even there were subtler things that I thought. What made Jazeera interesting is, like, lots of people in the world worry more about security than they really need to. But parts of Jazeera, or parts of any news organization, almost work like an intelligence agency, right? They're dealing with confidential sources, they're dealing with stuff that needs protection. But at the same time, it's not really their day job. So you get people who, by their nature, want to share stuff, but some of them are touching stuff that could get people killed. And so they had interesting challenges. And when I was there during Tahrir, for example, AT&T, and this is oddly technical, but I'll share it. But like, for people who don't remember, the Egyptian revolution starts off, the people come out into the streets, and at the time, there's the very real chance that the military is going to just wipe out these people in the streets. And at the time, Jazeera goes with their cameras and they're on the streets. And at the time, it was the honeymoon period with Jazeera, because lots of those people went on to say, listen, they believe that if Jazeera's cameras were not rolling, the military would have killed them. That it was
Mm.
because they had witnesses that they weren't. And for example, while I was there working on this WikiLeaks thing, AT&T cut off the internet to Jazeera's website. So Jazeera became the most watched website in the world because everyone wants to see this, and AT&T cut them off. And you look at it and you go, like, yes, like, don't you folks have redundancy? Like, haven't you planned for this? And it turns out they didn't, because technically they were still pretty green. And so the short version is, I came back. I told my wife, like, hey, listen, like, this is cool. They need help. Even if it means we go do a 6 months holiday, let's go see if we can get them started, and help them. Um, I went to Doha, and it turned out to be much bigger because they had no security team. So I helped them hire their first CISO, built out their team. And interestingly, while helping them, we built Canary, which is the so we tried a few different products in our time as Thinkst, which was our intention as a company. And while talking to them and seeing their need in Doha, which, uh, to take it a step back, they have this need where they've got offices all over the world. Like literally, it's this massive, massive network. And on any given day, their office in Pakistan could be getting hacked by someone they hired who's now using that access to walk the rest of the network, or someone in Myanmar, or someone in anywhere. And part of the problem that any new security team has is they just don't know where to focus. And so at this time, I've hired their security team. I just occasionally talk to their security team. And one of the things I told them to do is, listen, you should put honeypots all over your network. And I had made the suggestion for two reasons. We had started a program where they'd take in young interns so that they could train young technical people and grow them. And so I said to them, hey, listen, here's a good thing. Take all these old computers that you have, give them to the interns, have them set up simple honeypot software, and distribute those computers all over the world. And at least you'll know when parts of your network start getting lit up. And I forgot about it because I used to tell them to do lots of things. But I came back a few months later and checked with them, like, hey, how's this thing going? Because that's a good idea. And they hadn't done it. And when I came back a few months later to talk to them, I checked and they still hadn't done it. And then you realize that like honeypots are a good idea for exactly that reason, but nobody gets around to doing it. And so the idea then was, well, what if we made this thing so easy that even they would do it? Like literally that was our yardstick. Like, could we make something that even these people would deploy? And so we built Canary, and that ends up being, I suspect, if we're talking career wise, the next chapter, because we built this product. We we then I spoke to a bunch of people who knew me in my previous career, and again, almost in the same way, because we did that initial research work, we got into Black Hat. In this case, because I had a good history of people trusting me and listening to me in InfoSec, when we built a product and said, hey, this is a good idea, a bunch of people said, okay, we'll try that and see if it's terrible. And Alhamdulillah, it wasn't terrible. So we ended up having a bunch of early customers, and then some of those early customers had real success, and so they ended up speaking out publicly saying this is a great product. And again, like we got a little lucky. Like one of those early customers was Slack, and then Airbnb spoke about us and said like, hey, this product's cool. And based on that, more customers tried us.
So
And
taking a pause
yep.
here, so Slack and Airbnb, so you had personal contacts in there that were able to go ahead and try that,
Yeah,
or?
so it's a mix, right? Because I've now had 10 years publishing research and speaking at conferences and stuff like that. When we built Canary, um, on the one hand, I reached out to some really good customers in my previous career saying, hey, listen, if we build this and sold it at this price, would you try it?
Mm,
And the first 12 canaries that we built, because we built them as hardware devices, we built 12 of them and we sent them to people saying, if we charged $5,000 for this, would you pay for it? And there's a slight interesting thing for people who do product companies or tech companies. Before building it, I asked those people, because some of them were like leaders in their field, right? Like it's Etsy or like companies like that. And I said to their security people, hey, if we built this for 5K, would you buy it? And 10 of the 12 people actually said no.
mm,
And the reason was they can do that themselves. Um, but at the time, I had the intuition that if I asked Jazeera, they'd also say they could do it themselves, except they never do.
mm,
And so we said, okay, look, let's try this. Let's build this 12 and send it to people. And we sent that to 12 people, and 10 of them came back saying, actually, I'd buy this because like it takes away all of the effort. It's worth it. We were asking not a lot of money for it. And so those people said yes, they'd buy it. And so we started making them. And there's
So
a
this is
bunch
this is a
of
good thing to point out here, that the whole idea of the moonshot is that you're building stuff that the customers don't know that they want it.
yeah, I think technically, like we can have a long discussion on actually how that product journey went, because there's certainly interesting parts to it, and one of the interesting things is the kind of split that you need to have. There's a really great quote. If people if people take just two things away from this whole interview, the one thing should be to go read Richard Hemmings' You and Your Research, and the other is there's this clip from Ira Glass talking about the gap, where he says, like, a thing that nobody tells people starting off is that there's this period where you know enough to know what's good work, and you know enough to know that your work is not yet good. And lots of people then stop because their work's not that good. And actually, everyone has that phase, and the only way to get past it is just to do lots of work.
Mm.
And when you start building a product, one of the things that's hard is we know what an iPhone looks like. Like, when you build your first product, we all want it to be iPhone perfect. Like it's super slick. And so in your head you set a higher bar than can be reached so early on. Like, the iPhone wasn't the iPhone when it was built. Like it and again, though, what you have to find is that ground that says, if you can meet this hurdle, you get the opportunity to aim for the next hurdle. And so for us early on at that stage of the company, literally our company goal was, can we do cool stuff and not die? Like as a company, can we do cool stuff and still stay afloat? And when we started with Canary, like, we were very simple. We said, like, listen, can we get 10 people who'll pay us for this stuff? And once people pay you for it, then the thing is, like, hey, these people are paying us thousands of dollars. We have to not let them down. Like, how do we make sure we don't drop the ball for these people who paid us? And then what happened is we start iterating on it. But again, to take nothing away, like version one of our hardware, in retrospect, was genuinely ugly. And a thing that I want to make sure I mention is that we knew it was ugly,
Yeah.
but we couldn't put in the effort to make it as pretty as we wanted. And if we did, it would have been wasted effort, because what we needed was, can we find 10 people who think that even though this is ugly, it'll do the job for them?
Mm.
And in that case, we were lucky, because those early users ignored the warts and said, this is still valuable for us. And that allowed us to then grow and keep making it less ugly. So hardware wise, after that, we end up making pretty molds and end up making pretty boxes, and keep making that better and better. But for sure, there's a period where it's ugly and you're just scrambling to make it a little bit better as time goes. But alhamdulillah, that's gone well, and that gives you a chance to do other things. Like for us, it was always interesting to see, like, can we build a company the way we think a company should be built? Like there are bunches of things done in the industry, like, we don't want to do that. We don't ever want to celebrate with alcohol, because we don't think that that's important to us, and we want to make giving charity a part of the business, or we don't want to deal with interest or things like that. And if it's your company, and if you succeeding, then you get a chance to try all of those things and do all of those things. And so alhamdulillah, one of the things that I feel very fortunate for is, sometimes you do the right thing, you do everything right, and you still get kicked in the teeth. Like, you build the right product, you do the right research, and the market doesn't reward you, or it doesn't work out. And what happens in those cases is, you kind of learn, that it doesn't matter what you do, you're still going to get beat down. And one of the things that I know I've been very fortunate with is whenever we put in a lot of work, we did get lucky and get rewarded. And so like we worked like crazy at Sense Post, and it could have been nothing, but it worked out well for us. We got some level of fame. We managed to sell the company. And so the lesson you take away is, hey, if you work hard and do this research, it works out for you. And so starting Thinkst, my thought was, hey, if we work hard and we honest and we build useful stuff, we'll make money. And then we made some money, and it's like, well, okay, then we can shape our company this way and we can be generous. And we do that, and it still worked out for us. So mostly we've been lucky because it allowed us to grow in confidence and in ambition, where it's like, no, we can actually take bolder steps, we can impact the stuff differently. And so today, we sell Canary, like literally it's on all seven continents, which means we've got customers in Antarctica, which is pretty unusual. They've literally sent us pictures, photographs of like Canary next to penguins in the snow. Um, if you're using a large internet service today, there's a good chance they're using canaries on their network. And yeah, more than that, we get to try to shape a company and do it our way, so we can focus on making sure learning is important, making sure we still pushing the envelope with research, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah,
Awesome.
that's us so far.
So, in terms of the regarding the company building, and then you already mentioned about the values, what were your thoughts, or what are your thoughts in perhaps what you can share about your experience or in general advice around co-founder and finding that value alignment? So, when you were at Jazeera, you already had like co-founders then, or you were just working and playing around with the idea on your own?
Yeah, so when we did Sense Post, like I kind of hand waved over the question of equity because it was handled pretty badly. Like there was a point where like I was a pretty big part of the face of the company. Some of the other founders had left, and I was doing a lot of that work, but actually owned very little of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And when we actually sold, um, the my equity and the equity for some of the other people who joined us later was pretty terrible. And one of the lessons that I took away when I was starting Thinkst was that I wasn't going to do the equity deal with people. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
listen, here's what I'll do. We'll pay super well for the people who join us. So it's not done as a, I promise you someday our equity will be worth something. And we said that at the end of every year, we do a kind of profit share bonus. So even though you have no equity, everyone shares in the profit if the company is doing well. Um, that's how we had it from that point on. It didn't stay like that because although we have no intention of selling, at some point we had a pretty attractive offer to sell the company. And then I went, that's complicates things because now we've got people in the company like Marco's been with me from the first Canary we ever sold. And for him to not have equity if we sold would be terrible. And so at that point we actually created a share scheme, and now well, people have equity in the business. um yeah, so at the time they didn't, now they do, again
And that's very
mainly
interesting.
with
You
the
didn't have to, right?
principle.
People were already happy, just that you wouldn't
Yeah.
feel right about it.
So we've tried to do that pretty consistently, and I think you'll still get that stuff wrong. But again, part of the thing with building the company. So when we built it, like Marco was the first to join me, and essentially what I did is I started making money. Like I was getting some money for the work I did at Jazeera, but like we built this fishing site thing. We were getting some money, and I waited till I had enough money to guaranteed pay Marco for a year.
Mm.
And then Marco joined, and I knew that look, if we make no other money for the year, Marco is paid for. And I then said to Marco, like, hey, listen, like, I can pay you like an increase over what you're getting at Sense Post. Come here, because I think between the two of us, we'll be able to figure out how to make money building something. And early on, that was pretty much our thing. And one of the things when you're building a product company, there is a challenge, which is at the time, Marco and I were at the top of our pen testing game. Like we could make a ton of money pen testing. Like I was well known in the industry, all of that. To not take that money and say, okay, we're gonna try to build Canary as a product, there's a huge opportunity cost. And even for Canary's early days, you start making money, but you could have made more money doing services. And it sounds silly, but like one of the things I always recall talking about, um, we gave this talk at Black Hat when we first launched Canary, and I remember on the flight home, I was flying economy, and lots of the people who I knew were flying business because at that point they CISOs or senior security engineers, and that's like one of those times where you making a bet, right? Like you hoping that your stuff eventually takes off. And Alhamdulillah, in our case, it did. But yeah, that was the thing. So saying also, like we didn't have to give Marco shares, but like that, one of the principles that have worked very well for us consistently is defaulting to generosity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's multiple reasons for it, but almost as company culture we do this. So it's pretty strange. As a product company, we've never increased our prices from year one. So we've now got customers who are with us for 8 years, and we've never increased our prices. And in part it's because we don't have to. Like we thought that was a fair price. When we look at it now, we still think that's a fair price. Everyone who joins the company gets a company credit card where the policy is, if you think this is good for us, you can buy it. And so people buy books on it or buy stuff on it. And of course, one of the things is, well, that won't scale, or, well, what happens when you get abuse? And someday maybe we'll have to change that policy. But we now 50 people and the company is doing pretty well, and we haven't had to yet. And so for the most part, whether it's with our customers or whether it's with our partners, that stuff's worked well for us, and it works well for us as a company ethos wise. So one of the other stupid things, like tech companies enjoy giving out swag or company gear, and you'll often find people do it on these really cheap t-shirts that you wear once and they then shred. And from the very start, like we treat our swag really seriously. Like we have these really high quality hoodies, and we choose them based on, like, do we like the stuff? And in part for us, like there's these famous security researchers who've now taken our product into companies like Slack or Airbnb or whoever, and then that guy or that girl are gonna wear our hoodie, and I don't want that to suck. Like they literally wearing our logo on their chest. Like it should be the best thing we can buy. And so we started off with that, and today, like internally, the company has a gift site so that anyone in the company gets to say, like, I want to send a gift to this person, and here's the gift, and it gets packaged and sent off. And again, it's because we try to tell the company, like, listen, like, these people have paid us thousands of dollars. Like, we can send them a $50 hoodie. Like, there's no need to shortchange this. And again, for the most part, the markets responded really well to it, and so we can keep doing that stuff. So yeah, it's one of the things we feel proud of.
Awesome. So you basically didn't have any co-founders in that.
Yeah, so when I started Thinkst, officially, I split it between myself and my wife. So shares wise, it was myself and my wife. And we ran Thinkst, just the two of us, and then we hired people into it. And it's interesting because remember, we then built Canary like 5 years after starting Thinkst.
Mhm.
And so today, Canary is the company. And so when I look at Marco or Bradley, I see them as co founders because they built that first Canary with me. And for all intents and purposes, they have shares, and they are. And again, one of the things that's most important if you're company building is your early team, and like really our first 10 people, like have such an investment in the business and have built most of it. So at this point, like I wouldn't make such a difference between who are co-founders and who are not. I often introduce Marco and Bradley as co-founders without thinking too hard about it.
Yeah, so I think the reason I was mentioning that is this notion of like, especially on an entrepreneurial journey, you are by yourself, right? That's whole solo
I
thing, and then motivation, what
Yeah.
have you. Is that something you had to deal with, or you just were naturally good at it?
No, it's a good question and it's a fair question. And some people believe very strongly in it. So like if you apply to Y Combinator, which is one of the famous accelerators, they almost don't trust you as a single founder.
Yeah.
And their logic is that it's too hard as a single founder. Alhamdulillah, in our early days, well, look, I had trauma from the Sense Post deal. Like, even though it worked out well for us, there was trauma that said, I do not want that pain for a little while.
Mm.
And again, the little bit of winning that we did with Sense Post meant that I could do this on my own for a bit. Um, but certainly, as time goes on, there are challenges that are really hard for someone on their own, and there are things that are like everyone talks about when you founding a business, how you have mega highs and mega lows, and having co-founders helps you even that out. But there's also very practical things, right? For example, if you're building a young product company or tech company, on the very same day your sales department, for example, could have had the best day ever,
Mm.
and your engineering department could have had the worst day ever. And you need to celebrate with the sales folks and commiserate with the tech folks. And if you've got co founders, literally you can split that. Like one person can be doing one thing and one person can be doing the other. And compartmentalization like that is really hard as a single founder. There's it, yeah, it's a tough one because like i certain I did it as a single founder, and I think I choose to do it like that again. I choose the model that I chose again because early on with the product journey, there are some things that require single-mindedness. so
Mm.
so for example, as an example, if I think about it now, the traditional thing says go out, ask customers, listen to customers. And if we had a committee or if I had co-founders and the first 10 customers we asked said they would not buy Canary, I suspect it would have ended there. But at the time, I felt it was worth doing, and I was paying our bills, so I could say it doesn't matter what they said, we're going to build it. And I think early on it needs some of that single-mindedness.
Mm.
So, and again, I think it suits, like I'm a bit of a closet dictator, and so that worked for me with my style. But yeah, the traditional advice is that you need co-founders. I think if you take a step back, one of the abstracted lessons for people who are building companies is that um, there's no playbook that's completely easy to follow for any of this. I think famously, I think it was Jim Collins who wrote From Good to Great, and he talks about the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or. And one of the things he says is that when you're building, if you want to build a great company, everything's an and, not an or. It's not, do we build fast or do we build good? You need to be fast and it needs to be good. Otherwise you're just not going to make it. And I think, yeah, when building the company, you'll get lots of advice from really well-meaning folks, and none of it is a recipe book. For all of it, you get to try and you get to learn your lessons after you take the beatings. Um, but yeah, you iterate and you go from there.
Awesome. I know you've mentioned a few books already. Like, would you like to mention any more books or podcasts, top two, let's say, or three?
Sure. I think one that I really liked recently, Tony Fadell, who built the Nest thermostat, the Nest company, was the person who built the early iPod, and he's got a book out called Build, which talks about, so specifically if someone wants to build a tech product or a tech company, he goes through almost all the stages of it. Um, so Bold is good. Any of the other stuff I recommended is good, but almost more than anything, a friend of mine once told me he built a company called Duo, and one of his goals for Duo, which we adopted, was for Duo to be a learning machine.
Mm,
And one of the things that end up serving you well is taking that is, like I mentioned, how in my career I kind of optimized for learning. If you're building a company, like more than anything else, like you've got to build a learning organism, because you're going to do this thing that everyone says shouldn't be done, but you learn that maybe it can. And you're going to do this thing that seemed right, but you're going to learn that maybe it's wrong. And along the way, like there'll be stuff that will be different, but if you're learning, you get to pick up that signal and you get to iterate. And so almost more than anything else, I speak to some founders sometimes who tell me like they don't want to read too many books because it distracts them, or they don't want to do this. And again, I think it comes to the genius of the and. You've got to be able to read those books but not think it's a recipe.
yeah.
You've got to be able to listen to Bill Gates but know that he did it 40 years ago when some of the landscape has changed. um Even my advice, right, like sometimes people talk to me about starting a company, and I started Thinkst in 2010. Like the whole world has changed since then. And so you got to listen to old monkeys, because some of it is just you being kind to them, but mainly you've got to take the bits and pieces and learn and iterate on it.
Awesome. Beautiful. All right. So, what's next for you? Like, what's the next 10 years looking like? What's the new learning or the challenge here now?
That's a super good question. Look, for us as a company, we're in an interesting space now, because, like I mentioned before, we get to every time you achieve a little bit, you get to up your ambition, and you get the opportunity to try at another thing. And so for us, there's now the question that says, well, you've built this company and it's making some money, but can you make it an enduring product company? Like, can you invent the next product? Can you actually take this completely worldwide? Like, you've got a few thousand people who like you, but you're not VMware, you're not Cisco. And so the questions of, like, personally, we believe Canary helps people. We want everyone to have Canary. Like we want the product to spread. And company wise, there's also growth that says, well, like, you can't do all those things. Like, can we build a team? Can we build, and alhamdulillah, like, we've managed to build a nice team. The question is, can we now build a company that continually builds nice teams?
Mm,
Like, can we productize that? So along the way, you kind of get opportunities to see, like, well, does this scale? Like we were able to do this, but, like, can we be a learning organization when we are 100 people? Like, so at this point, yeah, we're trying all of that stuff. The world is pretty messed up right now, for a whole bunch of stuff. And so for us, part of it is like how do we keep true to our principles, still build a good company. One of our things was always to see if we can do well by doing good. Like we've been able to do it till now. Can we do that as we grow? But yeah, Alhamdulillah, I feel grateful that we get the opportunity to. So we'll see how it goes.
I love that. So instead of just sticking to don't be evil, you're like be good.
Yeah, I think it's
Awesome.
worth it.
Alhamdulillah, that's awesome. All right, so wrapping it up, we want to like see if you had something that you read in Quran today, or we can pick something randomly and then see how that is something that we can take practical advice from and wrap up with that.
That is such a good question.
Or you can
So
pick two random digits and then we see where we land at.
uh, I'm trying to think which of those will be better. Um, so Alhamdulillah, I've got a 7-year old, and so we go through lessons with her all the time, and I'm trying to think if there's anything recently that yeah mainly I think right now she's really enjoying the story of Hazrat Musa, spending a lot of time learning it and understanding it, and I think just the enduring lesson that says that sometimes challenges seem really impossible. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have the equivalent of someone who believes they are God King, and the power differential seems so huge that it almost seems like there's no point in trying. um but like our job is to try and to be excellent, and to grow, and yeah, then inshallah help comes from Allah. But like for our bit, not to give up hope, and to keep working for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, JazakAllahu khairan, for joining us. I think it was really inspiring. I learned a lot of new things and got a lot of motivation. Share with us. Let us know in the comments what did you learn and help us spread the message, inshallah. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time. Assalamu alaikum.